Hello everybody, my name is Walter and this is episode 28 of the Redstone Components Series. In this episode I want to cover briefly the 1.21.6 update, or Chase the Skies update. So let's start with the main feature of this update, which is the Happy Ghast. Now each and every one of those, at least in survival mode, starts as a so-called dried Ghast block. Now this block is actually movable via pistons and won't break that way. It doesn't emit any light and it's obviously a non-full or transparent block. Furthermore, you can get it by finding it in the nether near fossils. You can also get it through bartering, or you can craft it out of 1 soul sand block and 8 Ghast tears. Once you have one of those, you can waterlog it, and within 20 minutes, going through 3 intermediate stages, it will evolve into a so-called Ghastling at the very end then. This is basically the baby variant of our Happy Ghast. So let's spawn one in. And this is our Ghastling, and after another 5 minutes, that would turn into another Happy Ghast. This is the only way to get those little critters here. Now, some more information about them. Well, for one, they have a so-called home position. This is usually the point where they evolved from a dried Ghast. But if you were riding them, then that turns into the position where you dropped off. If they are not wearing a harness, then they will roam within 64 meters around this while staying relatively close to the floor. If they are wearing a harness, then that distance halves and they are just roaming within 32 meters or blocks. They also like snowballs, so if you want to attract them, just use those. But as I said, there is no way to use that to actually breed them this way. This only works through the dried Ghast. They will also slowly regenerate their health if they get damaged, and that even speeds up during rain. Furthermore, as I already mentioned, this is a rideable mod, so let me just find my Happy Ghast over there. Put on this harness, and you can see it's not a super fast mob, although this can be changed through attributes, I think. And, well, it's a flying rideable mob, so you can actually use this for 3D platforming in a sense. Now, if you drop off, you will start on top of this one here, and you can see this is a very wide mob, so this actually allows you to have 4 players on top of this mob here riding at the same time. Just only one is able to direct the mob itself. And yeah, as you can see, as long as I'm standing on top, this is not moving, but the moment I drop off, well, it starts to roam again, now around this new position. And that's all about the mob itself. Now we have to talk about the harness itself. So as I said, this is required to ride the Ghastling, or the Happy Ghast to be more precise, and can be crafted out of 3 leathers, 2 glass blocks, and a wool block. It can be colored, either by just using a colored wool block, or recoloring the harness itself later on. So that should be enough about the Happy Ghast. So let's have a look at some tweaks to existing items. First of all, saddles now have a crafting recipe with 3 leathers and 1 iron ingot. Shears can now be used to remove saddles, carpets, harnesses, and horse armor from mobs. So if you want to retrieve them, you no longer have to kill the mob. Furthermore, leads have a changed recipe, so they are all string now. You don't need slime balls anymore. And the physics concerning how they work have been reworked. So the snap distance is now 12 blocks, and it now allows entity-to-entity connections. So here just a few examples. So let's just grab a few sheep. And if I just click on them, this works as before. But if I shift click on a sheep while I'm holding some leashes, then, well, they get connected to that one. And I can continue with this. And over here, I already started a little bit. So let's just snap them to, let's say, this one there. And now I have all of those here changed together. This works with other mobs like the boats too. Now, if you sit in one of those boats, wait, this only works if you're not holding a leash. So if I'm sitting in one of those boats here, you can see it's dropping down. And if I went below the 12 block limit, then it would actually break the lead. So how can you get around this issue? Well, if you're not sitting direct in the boat, but sitting on a mob that is sitting in the boat, this issue is no longer an issue. This has already been used for some designs of elevators with a hidden mechanic in the background where you just connect with a leash to the, well, cabin, you could say. MumboJumbo, for example, experimented around this idea. I put a link in the description, but I'm not exactly a big fan of this idea since if you click on the wrong spot, then this whole thing here will break, and there's no real way or no easy way to fix that then. So anyway, there is one last special case I want to talk about. If you have big mobs like horses or also boats and a happy Ghast, you can leash that one together, and then you have not one connection but 4 connections, as you can see over there. So then some final tweaks here. Now carrots behave like apples when you're talking about horses, mules, and donkeys. And now if you hit a Ghast, so the not happy Ghast, with its own fireball, then it will drop not only some tears potentially, but also a new music disc, which has, when you're working with comparators, an output of 10. And that brings us to the last part for today, which are technical changes and new commands. Although the later I'll only cover briefly here since I want to go more in detail in my Redstone Components series. Now, first of all, we have a new game mechanic, which is the Locator Bar. And if that is enabled, then it will replace the XP bar, but only if you're not leveling up, then the XP bar becomes visible for a few seconds again, or if you're using an anvil. Now, to enable this, you need to set the game rule Locator Bar to true, and then if a player or another waypoint is in the vicinity, the Locator Bar will appear. Now, what can be shown on the Locator Bar? Well, generally all players as a default, and then also other living entities, so mobs and armor stands. So let me just show you an example. So this is our armor stand, and you can now see it appeared on the Locator Bar. And the Locator Bar also has a little arrow if I'm looking too high or too low. So you have a rough idea where it is. And if I were to get further away, then the icon would also get smaller. So very simple to see. And you can also see the moment I have nothing visible again, the Locator Bar disappears. Now, this is controlled by 2 attributes. So the waypoint transmit range gives an upper range of how far this entity with the attribute can be seen at a maximum. And then the waypoint receive range, which only players can have, gives an upper range of how far a player can see. So it's basically the minimum of the 2 that actually counts. So that is how you can get an entity like this here onto the Locator Bar. And you can see the color is random because this entity doesn't belong to any kind of team. If the entity belongs to a team, then the color used is the team color. The icon and the color can also be adjusted using the waypoint command, but more about this in a second and in another episode. You can actually hide from the Locator Bar of other players by, for one, sneaking or using a potion of invisibility. You can also just via a pumpkin head or another mob head. And spectators are only visible to other spectators. And with that, let's have a look at the commands. So first of all, we have the waypoint command, which allows you to change the color and the style of the waypoints on your Locator Bar. It also allows you to just get a general list of all of the currently available waypoints themselves. So at the moment, it's just me, nothing else, and that is also the reason I don't actually have a visible Locator Bar, since, well, it doesn't make sense to show myself on that one. The datapack command has a new option, datapack create, which creates a new and empty datapack, which requires rather high permission levels, so you need to be either the owner of the server or playing in a single player world. And if we do this, then we have to give it the name of the datapack folder and a description for our pack MC meta file. And if we do this, it will create a new but pretty bare bones empty datapack. Then the dialog command allows us to make custom dialogues or menus. This example here I took directly from the wiki, so give yourself a diamond and then nope, nothing happens, and yes please, gives us access to the give diamond command. And this can be quite useful for minigames or adventure maps and similar. And then finally, which might be rather useful when you're making a bug report, /version allows you to get the current version of the server you're playing in. So that can be quite helpful for the developers to figure out what is going on and what version of the game is actually affected. And with that, we've reached the end of this episode about the Chase the Skies update. I hope you enjoyed it. I wish you a nice day, and well, see ya.